What's up, guys? Welcome back to Chimicomics, and we are going to be covering Nailbiter today. But first, I've got a special guest today. This is Kaitlyn, my girlfriend. Say hi to the people.
Hello, people.
Alright, so Nailbiter is a horror book. It's an image comic by Joshua Williamson and Mike Henderson, and we both recently read this just a couple weeks ago, so I thought we'd throw up a review on it. So, Kaitlyn, what did you think of the story?
I'm not usually one for horror. Scary's okay, but horror is not really my thing. But I walked away from this trilogy. I was really appreciative of it. The art was good. The storyline was... I thought it was really good. Had some issues with the ending, but we'll get into that. I don't know. Overall, I think it was really good. What do you think?
What would you rate it out of 10?
For me, I'd probably give it an 8.5, 9 out of 10.
Okay.
What about you?
High. So I really enjoyed the story. Like you, I had a little problem with the ending. I understand that Mr. Williamson meant to do that. That was the ending he wanted. So the series was 30 issues. It split into 3 volumes. You got volume 1 there and 2 and 3 right here. A lot of this book is just extra material, so they're all 10 issues each. And they all read super quick, so this is probably the fastest comic I've ever read. You can get through a book, and how long did it take you? Like
I
20
sat down
minutes?
and read the whole thing in like an hour and a half, 2 hours tops, I think. Maybe.
For all 30?
For all 30. It was so good. It was just... It sort of drew me in, and I was like, I cannot just stop at 10 or 20. I had to read the whole thing.
Each book, like, every 10 issues left off on a cliffhanger.
Oh, yeah. So it was like, yeah.
The way they split them up into 3 books was perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And these are called the murder editions. So it's like it's oversized, it's omnibus size in height. And they've got, like, the script...
Yeah.
And sketches and just like insights from the creators, so it's cool stuff. If you go on in stock trades, you can get them for super cheap. At least volumes 1 and 2 you can. I got them for $14 a piece. So the art's really good, especially for an indie comic. And I've never read anything by Williamson, so this was good to see like how his writing is. I liked it a lot. Like, I'm glad that the first thing I got to read by him was his own thing and not something else. But this makes me excited for the Flash, which he's doing right now. So basically the concept is that there's this small town in Oregon called Buckaroo, and what's been happening is there's been 16 serial killers
come out of this small town.
They come from that town, and they don't kill when they're in the town. It's just that later on when they're arrested, they find out that that's where they're from. So it kicks off with an FBI agent. He's investigating the town, trying to figure out what's going on, and he calls his buddy, who's an old army interrogator, to come help him. And that guy had just gotten reprimanded for killing a suspect while he was interrogating him. So he was at a low place in his life,
violent interrogation tactics.
He was about to kill himself when his friend gave him a call, and so that saved him. So now he's going to help his friend. He gets there, and his friend is nowhere to be found. So that's where that starts. He befriends the sheriff of the town. Her name is Crane. And the most recent butcher, Warren, what's his full name?
Oh no, I'm trying to... this is what I was looking for.
Oh, all the butchers?
It doesn't tell his...
Just the Nailbiter?
Real name, yeah.
Anyway, Warren's serial killer name is the Nailbiter. Let's show them that.
So those are the 16 that have come out of this small town.
So Warren, turns out, used to be sweethearts with Sheriff Crane.
Yeah, back in high school.
He ditched her and then went to kill people, pretty much. And now he's been tried for all the murders he committed, and they found him not guilty. So he got out of that, comes back to town, and it's just really awkward seeing the interaction between him and the sheriff, because
so much tension.
Yeah, and the whole town holds it against her too.
Yeah, as if it's her fault.
They think that she's giving him a pass or something, even though it had nothing to do with her.
I mean, I can see why they kind of thought that, because she doesn't she's not so aggressive with her investigations. When he's back in town, she's investigating, but it's a lot of undercover investigating without people knowing, so that she can find out everything she needs to. And
she
that's
holds
probably
information
why
from people.
Yeah,
she doesn't let the whole town know.
But it's for a good reason. So
yeah, and I think she's pretty hard on him. Extra hard.
She holds him so accountable for the things he did.
She lets Finch, the guy who's about to kill himself, who just came into
the
town,
interrogator.
She lets him beat him up, just
trying to get information, and
you slipped and fell or something. Is what she said.
Yeah.
So getting into the meat of the story, Finch and Crane, two bird names.
I know. Ironic, huh?
They find these tunnels underneath the town, and they apparently go everywhere around the whole town.
Yeah.
They're
underneath.
There's cave paintings and stuff like that.
Yeah, they're underneath there's a graveyard, and all of these 16 serial killers have headstones there. And one of them slips and falls down a hole, and that's how they discover them. And they keep coming back and forth. They explore a little bit in the underground tunnels and caves, and then they come back and they go to town and do some investigations there with the information they found. But then they eventually work their way to where they find out that there's this whole underground system that goes from the graveyard underneath all the way to the lake, and there's these underground temples, and it's a whole sunken city. So
there's a huge Aztec temple.
Yeah.
They find.
Didn't it say it wasn't it wasn't a building, it was made out of something? Or am I
it's
imagining
fake.
that?
Yeah. It's not that old.
Yeah.
But it is
it was put there.
50 years old or so, something like that. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Maybe 100. But the point is, it wasn't real. It wasn't a real Aztec temple.
Yeah.
There it is right there, actually. So you can see it underwater there. I'm trying to find where they find his friend.
But so all the while they're doing this investigation, and they come across another butcher. So it's Warren and Sheriff Crane and Finch all doing their investigations together, and they are sort of hunted down and attacked by a 17th butcher. And it wasn't expected, so that added on this whole twist, because you think that they're just gonna investigate, people don't kill while they're in the town, it's only when they leave, and that definitely, I think, added to the suspense factor, because you're all the while questioning when they're gonna turn up again, who they are, and the real story underneath it. So that's another thing that I think added to me just wanting to keep reading and reading and reading. So it was a nice thrill factor. Did you find it?
Here it is. So they find Finch's friend in those tunnels, and his arms and legs have been cut off.
Which was actually signatures of previous butchers. So he, like, his mouth was sewn shut, his limbs were amputated, some other things that were specific MOs or signatures for the other butchers that had come from Buckaroo. So
Right. So
kind of makes you wonder.
It also, like, throws you off the scent of who it could be.
Yeah.
Because they're mixing everything up.
Yeah.
I kind of mentioned this part. Brian Michael Bendis, a pretty famous comic writer, he's actually in this book. And he shows up to the town. He's like, hey, I want to write a comic book about your town. So he goes and has interviews with people, and then Warren finds him. And he's like, oh, I'm a big fan. Love your work. Could you sign some of my comics? And he's like, no. So that was funny. Then they confront this.
There's the other butcher that just showed up that I was talking about.
What do they call him? Like the Dark Butcher or something?
Something like that, yeah.
And so he's working for what we later find out is called the Master. Mm-hmm. So there's this girl in the town, and she's like a teenager. She's about to graduate high school. Mm-hmm. And these kids are picking on her. I guess they're jocks, aren't they? And so
it's like the pastor's son, and
yeah, one of them is the preacher's son in the town. But anyway, later on, like, one of them gets killed by the butcher guy, and the other ends up killing himself because someone told him about some great cause or something for the town. He's like, I'm going to save this town. He shoots himself. Mm-hmm. That's the preacher's kid. And so, like, that's a big problem. And so this girl, apparently she's Sheriff Crane's daughter. And you can guess who the father is. But the kid doesn't know. Only Sheriff Crane does. Even Warren doesn't know about it. Like, at the very end of the story, he finds out. And there's a really touching moment there where, like, I know, how can you empathize with a serial killer? But he says, there's this really intense part where he says, I would have killed you in the cradle if I would have known that you existed, because I didn't want you to go through what I went through.
Well, it's, yeah.
But he's just like, but I'm here for you now, and I want to help you so that you don't end up like me. He says it's not too late.
Yeah.
You can still be a good person. So then later on, there's like this big thing going on in Atlanta, all the way across the country. Somebody's killing people
from Buckaroo.
Yeah, all the victims are from Buckaroo.
Yeah.
And it turns out that all these people left Buckaroo because they didn't want, like, to be associated with that place. They wanted to, like, get away and make their own life, where nobody knew where they were from. And I think Warren was helping them.
I think it was almost like an underground railroad kind of thing. Yeah. He was sort of funneling them out to try and help them avoid whatever was causing these people from Buckaroo to be serial killers. So, yeah, it was pretty intense.
So the Dark Butcher guy was the one killing the people, and
didn't they frame another guy from Buckaroo to make it look like it was another Buckaroo butcher?
Which guy?
Just the kid. There was a kid.
Oh yeah, they do. Him. Yeah, they do frame this kid. He also left. He was one of them. He was like the only one left alive, so they blamed it on him. Yeah. But back just a bit before that, there's they send this FBI agent. Her name is Agent Barker, to help with the investigation, and she gets kidnapped, and the master, like, does his thing and, like, messes with her brain and implants that whatever desire to murder people. And so she's been having, like, these dark fantasies about killing people just because she wants to. But it never happens. And then eventually, like, they'll show it happening, but it's fake because it's, like, a different color, I think. It's, like, a different shading.
And then it cuts back to
then it cuts back to reality. And then there's one fantasy where she kills Carol, Finch's friend, who got his arms and legs cut off. And that one's actually real.
Yeah.
So that's how Volume 2 leaves off.
Well, every time she has those, like, daydream moments or whatever you want to call them, she consistently says, "They made me watch."
Right.
So you've got that playing into, because the master took her, and then she keeps saying that they made me watch. And I mean, the whole time you're given, like, little pieces that eventually you're going to see strung together to figure out how they got from point A to point B. But I didn't. Others that may have read it may have put it together before I did. But you're given just enough that you can't figure it out before the ending. So you're never ahead of what you're reading.
Also, the ending is so out there and weird that I don't think anyone's going to guess it.
Mm-mm. Going back to Agent Barker, and she kept saying they made me watch. As you keep reading, you figure out that in those underground tunnels, I guess it's sort of like a laboratory of sorts, and is it the doctor of the town doctor and the mortician that are together? It's the doctor, that the surgeon.
Yeah.
Because so the town doctor and the mortician are working together, and one of them is that dark butcher and one of them's the master. But you find out along the way that the doctor's grandfather, I believe, was involved.
The doctor's father.
Okay.
Was the one that started it.
Project Whitechapel?
Dr. Glory. So, Dr. Glory's father is the one that founded Project Whitechapel.
Yeah. So, a testament to Jack the Ripper.
So, he built that big temple thing.
Yeah. But so Project Whitechapel brought in, I think, several people, and they were tested on to see if there was a gene that caused you to be a murderer / serial killer. Those 8 people had already been convicted of various and sundry crimes, and those projects have continued, and each of those Buckaroo Butchers has watched and been injected with some sort of formula that Dr. Glory had created, and they would watch them to see if they could resist, I guess, that urge to kill somebody, or if they gave into it. And
all of them are his test subjects, all the butchers.
So all 16 of them, and then the 8 from like 50 years ago or whatever. But he calls it his, like, I don't know exactly what he calls it, but he thinks that these tests and figuring out whether or not serial killers are genetically prone to be that way or not is his way of saving the town. So he's trying to, like, I guess, purge the town somehow. And so it's like his...
Well, by testing on the killers, he wanted to find out what makes them kill, but he realized that you're not able to do that unless you make killers. So that's where the butchers come in.
Mm-hmm.
He makes his own killers.
Yeah.
By putting them through what they call the gauntlet.
Yeah.
Which is like just a horror maze that they make you go through.
Which is the entrance to those, the maze, the gauntlet, is that underground Aztec temple. Like, that's the beginning and like the entrance and exit to it. So
they go, Finch and Crane go to talk to Dr. Glory's son, and he's off his rocker. Like, he takes some of that blood from the butchers that they got from him, and he injects it into himself, and then he just explodes.
Yeah.
So that was weird. Then Warren and his daughter discover this. Well, he knew about it, but she didn't. He shows her this lab, and it's full of just blood from serial killers.
Mm-hmm.
It's really freaky. So she sees that, and he tells her, like, you know, what's going on with it, what it does.
So Dr. Glory is the town doctor now, but he, like, I guess he took the blood from prior serial killers that he had created, and then ran tests on it or what to see if he could find out what caused it. And when Warren and his daughter Alice are in that lab, do they destroy it, or is it the Dark Butcher? Because, like, they break all the vials. It's a whole
he
bloodbath.
tears the place down.
Yeah. The Dark Butcher. Yeah.
He says he's hiding the master's work. So
it's just this huge top secret thing that, like, it was pretty much like, if we tell you what's really going on, we have to put you through our program and make you a serial killer. Because they couldn't let it get out what they were doing, because obviously people would frown on it, but they were convinced that they were going to save their town, the world, whatever, but it was just a twisted view of things.
So Alice and Warren, they're running away from the Dark Butcher while he's smashing the whole place up, and turns out that he's one of the butchers, Mr. Fatal. He's one of the butchers anyway. So he has been the Dark Butcher this whole time, and
working for the Butcher of Buckaroo.
And Alice ends up killing him.
Oh, there's a typo.
Another one.
Buckaroo. But yeah, while he's talking about prior serial killers from Buckaroo coming back, in that graveyard, there were some inconsistencies on some of the headstones, and it turns out that some of the Buckaroo butchers were not really dead. The first of the butchers was the book burner, and he was not dead either. He actually pops up a couple times.
So we forgot to talk about, like, the whole reason for the book, which is the Nailbiter.
Oh, yeah. And why he's called that.
Yeah, so ever since he was a small kid, like, he saw this family get murdered by one of the butchers. Mm-hmm. And so that did a number on him, and he also has always bit his nails. So, like, that gives him comfort, and it gets to a point where he bites his own nails down
where they bleed
to the bone, and he starts bleeding.
And the taste of blood just sort of...
Yeah, it's a whole slippery slope.
Yeah.
So when he runs out of nails, he starts to try to bite other people's nails. The point where he left Crane is when she started biting her nails too. And
it was their senior prom night.
Yeah. And he looked at her and he's like,
I'm gonna kill her.
If I don't get out of here, I'm gonna kill this woman.
And he really did love her, and he thought that was the best thing, but he never gave her an explanation until X amount of years later, and they're back together, and they're going through this whole rigmarole together.
So when he leaves, he kidnaps these people, he bites their nails off, and then he kills them.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much all he did. Like a dozen people or more, definitely more. But the whole twist of the story is that it turns out the mortician did it. Who we weren't really expecting. I wasn't.
Oh no, I thought he was on their side.
But he reveals that there's a murder gene apparently, and they have a way to test for it. So, then Agent Barker comes back, and he makes her his new butcher. And she struggles for a minute, but then she fights back and cuts his arm off.
Yeah. And they're in the gauntlet, like they're fighting the mortician in the gauntlet right now, and he's trying to turn her, and she fights against the so-called gene.
They're trapped in the whole place, the underground tunnels, and the mortician's plan is to blow up the entire town, like to just get rid of the whole thing. They've planted explosives all throughout using the tunnel system, and because of that, the only way they can get out of this place is through the gauntlet. So the town's been blown up, and their only way out is through that house of horrors. Well, Agent Barker's already been through it, so she'll be fine.
That's what turned her.
So Warren, his last good deed is to grab Morty, the mortician.
Yeah.
And
clever, right?
Just jump off into the fire. So, giving the rest of the group to time to escape.
Also, Agent Barker gives her life.
Right.
Because she's like, if I'm just going to become a serial killer, I want my last deed here on Earth to be a good one. So I don't remember exactly what she does, but she just like
jumps in the way of the rubble, I guess.
Yeah. Giving the rest of them just enough time to get out and be above ground before things went boom.
Super weird plot twist.
1 year later.
I don't know. I didn't really care for the murder gene thing. Like all of that.
It felt like it wasn't. I don't know, like, I guess it felt real. Like, people could actually take people and test them. And then they throw in this murder gene, and that's where it was just kind of like, but is that real? Like, it's
realistic
just
throughout the whole story until you get to the end.
Yeah.
And it's just all sci-fi.
And then that was the point where I was just like, okay, I mean, I want to finish reading it, but I was just kind of accepting it as part of the book, not, like I said, just not reality. So it was, different.
So it cuts to a year later. Alice is living with her mother, Sheriff Crane.
Are they back in Buckaroo? Did they, like, rebuild the town?
No, they're in Portland now.
Oh, yeah, okay.
She wrote a book about the whole incident, got rich from it, and bought a big house in Portland. So they're living together, and it's just it's just psycho.
Yeah, total Hitchcock psycho. Norman Bates.
Here comes Warren to kill her.
Which we saw him jump into a firing blaze of glory.
And so he's laying there, and then this is actually pretty cool. And then it goes black, and then black again, and then he starts bleeding out. So I do like that part of it. I thought that was cool.
It's.
But she's basically like saying goodbye to him, thinking that she killed him, and then
he's like back again, which was so
dead.
Weird to me. Like,
and then it's just a bunch of yelling. So it leaves off on a big cliffhanger.
And then it says the end ? So I mean, I was left with a few questions.
I thought the last couple pages were fun. Like,
yeah, kind of. twist.
I do get that part of it. I didn't care for the whole murder gene.
Yeah.
The whole conspiracy
Not my
with the
fave.
town, I was down with.
Oh yeah, that was I thought
That
that
was
was good for the
Oh,
story.
and it turned out that all the butchers had the murder gene except for
Warren.
He didn't have it.
He chose to murder those
Yeah.
people, even though he watched and went through the gauntlet.
Mm-hmm.
I guess during high school, right before he leaves, he didn't have that so-called gene that they'd been testing for. So that was also, I guess, kind of when Crane was like, "Okay, I'm actually done." Like, because I think she gets really hard, like super hard on him after that, because she's just like, "I cannot believe that you chose to do that when you had a choice not to."
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's really good.
He does have fantasies about telling her, though, like, everything.
Yeah.
So
He just never does.
It's apparent that he wants to be with her. So the ending is kind of weird that he would try to kill her when he still loves her. But, I mean, it was fun. It was a fun ending.
Very twisty.
I think Williamson's doing another independent work.
Like a thriller? Or, excuse me, a horror?
See, I can't remember, like, what it is or what it's even about. But I'll look it up later. But I thought this was really good.
Yeah.
It's definitely worth a read, and I got it for pretty cheap, so I definitely recommend it. I would give it like a 8.5 out of 10. Like, the work aside, there were a lot of errors in this book, in all 3 books.
Yeah.
But that's another topic.
Yeah.
So I hope you guys enjoyed. Have a good one, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.